2006, the year we staked our claim on Earth, advancing to free all humanity. As we counted down the new year, our reach had never been greater. From the opening of a new CCHR exhibit, to spearhead an assault on planetary suppression, to an army of VMs, tens of thousands strong, bringing help to 14 disaster zones and millions of individuals more. And from a planetary assault upon the reactive mind, with bookathons spanning the globe for a global Book One boom. To our flag, now atop the world, symbolizing our sky-high commitment to a new civilization. And that was the vantage point from which we rolled out the LRH birthday celebration. Beginning with the source of all we possess, it was a source presentation with stories from Ron's journey to salvage humanity, as told by those who were there. From his first pioneering adventures across America, to the dynamic principle of existence, and the hilltop cabin where he wrote Excalibur. And finally, the height of world conflict, and from which emerged the bolt from the blue to change all things future. And that future was more evident than ever as missions and orgs world over presented Ron what he most wished for on his birthday, with a parade of unparalleled expansion, culminating with our next giant step in this age of ideal organizations, our world-class org at the golden gates of a new civilization, San Francisco Day and Foundation, both St. Hill size. But if that was source at the planetary crossroads, it took on an entirely new visual dimension in this golden age of knowledge with the release of Ron's only film Congress, fully restored after a 5-year, million-hour project supervised directly by RTC. And all to take that phrase, bringing source to the world, to another plane entirely. And that's how we rocketed into May 9th, as Dianetic celebrations erupted in more than 150 cities across every continent. Whereupon it was a new book in public hands every 6 seconds. New Book One groups at the rate of one every day. And now standing more than 3,500 strong in the name of that better bridge. But if the year's halfway point was a groundswell at public level, it took on OT dimensions at our annual Free Wind Summit. First, to take our golden age of knowledge into new OT realms, it was LRH's final congresses on the highest potentials of operating Phaeton. Then again, as for just what it means to create an OT civilization, it was a source briefing like no other, with the LRH view from 3 feet behind society's head, putting in planetary ethics as the vital component to universal salvation, and the purpose that drove the formation of the Sea Organization and custodians of OT itself. And OT action was precisely what rolled out from there. First, with an unrelenting rollout of new missions across every populated landscape world over, representing every race, color, creed, and language, no less than 43 in the space of just 6 months. But all that was just a prelude to what we're laying down through our greatest crusade in history, our next wave of new ideal orgs that will soon rise on skylines of key cultural centers everywhere. Quebec, living heart of French-Canadian culture, and at the crossroads of their most traveled thoroughfares. Venezuela, the symbolic center of South American freedom, and adjoining Simon Bolivar Plaza. Pordenone, the old Italian heartland, and from which will stand the epitome of the new land. Torino, a magnificent 19th century villa, epitomizing the culture we are revitalizing. Then again, in Atlanta, Georgia, it's a classic mansion that is Southern heritage reborn. While for a new Southern California, it's our Orange County org in the making, and one of that city's most historical landmarks. And yet another in Pasadena, right in the center of historic Old Town. And if all of it represents our third dynamic footholds from which we'll spearhead application across entire geographic zones, we also hit the ignition switch with worldwide fourth dynamic programs engineered for planetary clearing. From the largest anti-drug campaign anywhere, from Asia to Mexico and all points on the compass, to arrest the primary cause of decline, to a human rights campaign in representation of just what we stand for, and 30 public service announcements across international airwaves to instill true tolerance and peace and blow away the primary block to world clearing. And if that was the earth-shaking groundswell, it went right off the Richter scale at our IAS anniversary as we unveiled campaigns to tens of millions more and deep into social nerve centers, and whereupon we fired all engines. For whole-track suppressives, it was the most lethal assault in anyone's history. From their sordid beginnings to their modern-day betrayal, 2 hours of DVD, now into the mailboxes and onto the desks of millions in the name of global obliteration. Then again, to uplift the entire culture and restore the decency from which man was robbed, 21 precepts emanating from every satellite across all airwaves, flanked by massive distribution to open the floodgates and infuse the way to happiness into every sector of society. And to extend our help across all boundaries, through all frontiers, we hit the boosters on our volunteer minister crusade, reaching millions by the year, and now through virtually every artery of planet Earth, from the bells of Africa to the flying doctors of the Australian outback, and right up the South American Amazon, bringing the message, something can be done about it. And in living testament to just that fact, we honored our newest IAS Freedom Medal winners, each in their own right exemplifying the scope of our planetary salvage and heroic commitment to reshaping the destiny of Earth. While finally, to cap it all, our most impressive ideal org to date in the most important city on Earth, from a life improvement center on the city's most traveled thoroughfare to the newly restored home of LRH's original HCO, to a magnificent new church in the capital of the English-speaking world, London, England. So yes, if 2005 was our year of global impact, this was the year we embraced all humanity. So setting the stage for even greater things to come. So welcome to Los Angeles, California, home to Church of Scientology International, Celebrity Center International, the Pacifica Bridge, and the largest concentration of Scientologists on Earth. Join us now at the Shrine Auditorium, for this is the New Year's Celebration 2007!
Good evening. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, and welcome to a fully classic Scientology New Year, replete with 1,000 cascading balloons and a rousing rendition of Auld Lang Syne. We'll also take our time-honored tour of far-flung Scientology activities, with every picture on those screens perfectly synchronized to elegantly attired speakers, after which we'll ring down the curtain on 2006 and set the stage for 2007. Or, if you prefer, we're about to stuff and mount another record year on the game room wall, then lock and load for the incoming. But regardless of how it's phrased, what I'm about to tell you is not metaphoric, it's a technical fact. While the world out there will soon shout Happy New Year, we can honestly guarantee it. And while everyone's been wishing for peace on earth and goodwill towards man, we can factually make it happen. Because when you invoke the full power of LRH technology and let it loose across the planet, well, that's the air of holiday magic you may have sensed when entering this hall tonight. And even if sometimes subtle and oftentimes working in the blink of an eye, you better believe that magic is real. So, watch closely. While you've heard it said Scientology isn't just in the news, it is the news, that phrase doesn't even begin to capture our story through the last 12 months, not with 16 daily hours of non-stop televised coverage and 4 full miles of press, bringing word of LRH technology to 42 million people a week. And that's more coverage of Dianetics and Scientology this year than the whole previous decade. And they weren't only covering, they were explaining, as every major media machine on earth ran with our backgrounds and ceremonies: New York Times, LA Times, People Magazine, Hello Magazine, ABC, BBC, ETV, you name it. And while they may have headlined it Wedding of the Century, what they all gave amounted to an intro lecture on ARC. And given ARC equals understanding, and understanding begets more, word of the magic triangle also sent 24.5 million people to our internet sites, 30 every minute, 24 hours a day, and that too is highest in history. But when talking history in the making, you're talking planet-wide demand of LRH books. Last year, he was named the single most translated author, while this year he not only broke his own record, he also set another as the single most published author. And that's 2 world titles as bestowed by the world record experts at Guinness. But of course, no matter how you translate an LRH book, it ultimately spells effective help, and for 2006 record on that one, it was 3.1 million hours of volunteer minister service, although, to give credit where credit is due, some 10% of those delivering VM tech are not only volunteer ministers, they're also doctors, nurses, Red Cross workers, firemen, and cops, a full 7,500 of them newly brought on board in the last 12 months. Likewise, coming on board through 2006 were those who direct social services, from mayors and governors to prime ministers and presidents. It's 560 city, state, and federal governments now on our org board, just as we're on theirs. And just as our org boards naturally expand, so do our orgs. This year alone, we pushed the square footage total to more than 8 million, and that's nearly double the whole of Vatican City. We also pushed the boundaries of Scientology itself, although you've got to go pretty far afield to see it. Try the Khyber Pass in Afghanistan, the Niger Delta, and the Kingdom of Bahrain. 3 new lands opened just this year to LRH technology. And when you factor in what else we push to the far ends of the earth, it's not just bringing our names to the airwaves or spreading it across world headlines. It's about 14.6 million people actually experiencing LRH technology through the last 12 months. And even that's not all, because those hearing it from LRH himself in this golden age of knowledge now span 104 nations, including both North Korea and the People's Republic of China. And all told, they've clocked in over 20 million hours listening to his congresses. And given correlations between the knowledge of Scientology and speed of progress up the bridge, the final printout reads as follows. Take the 2,970,000 sessions through the last 12 months, add another 475,000 hours in advanced org chairs, and a solo knot session every 26 seconds, and it's not just astronomical, it's literally infinite, because we're now making a new OT7 2007 or a new OT8 every single day. And for anyone out there who still can't believe it, go to French Polynesia, go to the Czech Republic, go to Hong Kong and the Ukraine, because that's where you'll now find new OTs in action, while as for everywhere else across this world, it's now 7,505 Scientology groups, missions, and orgs, and if it all adds up to more expansion this decade than our first 50 years combined, well, hang on tight, because that's only the warm-up lap, and we're about to drop the hammer at the starting line of 2007, and that's why I say to all Scientologists, rip up every known law of the physical universe and behold the magic, because this is the Scientology New Year celebration 2007. Now, as this is indeed a classic New Year's celebration, we'll consider what it means to work the magic of LRH Tech across every sector of application. And make no mistake, to a stultified student discovering applied scholastics, a strung-out addict entering Narconon, a failing businessman chancing on a wise consultant, LRH technology seems nothing if not magical. But to miraculously transform a whole planet, you've got to conjure up the full LRH technical legacy, very much including all you just saw enumerated on those screens as highlights of 2006. And while we can't yet do it in the blink of an eye, you'll be amazed how much ground we can take when we do it as a strategically coordinated force. Because with accelerating speed through each passing month of this past year, we really did ignite all engines at the IES anniversary just 2 months ago. To quickly recap, those campaigns were specifically engineered to halt the dwindling spiral, or more technically, to literally audit this planet from 3 feet behind society's head and thereby remove the surface charge before it builds up and blows the whole works. So yes, indeed, as a combined whole, you can label those strategies as planetary salvage, embracing all pivotal programs from the very top in the creation of new ideal orgs to the very bottom in eradicating the virus of aberration at its source. Accordingly, if not poetically, we're better to begin a year-end review than with our 2006 campaign to break the dark spell cast across Earth by psychiatry. By way of a recap, that campaign was expressly, maybe even diabolically, engineered to ignite both government action and media blizzard. It's also got an internal kicker, our mental health budget adjustment kit, which essentially works like a smart bomb in that it sniffs out psych fuel lines and blows the funding mechanism. And in that way, to put it bluntly, we booby-trap the whole psychiatric ecosystem. So while only 9 weeks have passed since global activation, here's the preliminary action report. CCHR Central has a tracking board designed to measure collateral damage from our campaign rollout. It monitors both incoming complaints of psych abuse and outgoing psych alerts to state and federal prosecutors. And while it's sometimes tricky to determine just whose bomb hit the ammo dump, this much is blazingly clear. While it takes a psych 8 years to earn his license, we've already yanked 21 in the last 4 weeks. Then there's all our campaign represents as a high-pressure system for an anti-psych climate, of which the best barometer is the Anti-Psych Media Index. And while CCHR trackers describe the last 4 weeks as highest ever, the sites themselves have a somewhat more descriptive name for it. Apocalypse Now. And here's the satellite view. The first of 4 plagues to visit psychiatrists in the wake of our campaign was a veritable storm of British press, more than 800 column inches mushrooming up from our launch site in England. Then came the 2,600 newspaper, magazine, and e-news articles like a cloud of locusts from elsewhere around the world, followed by a third swarm of news clips, documentaries, and televised forums. Then, just when psychs thought the seas had parted and they could safely enjoy this holiday season, It all rained down, because what with CCHR-inspired hearings on the menace of new generation psych drugs, the age-old secrets of how psychs cut deals with the FDA have finally come to light. And since the FDA can't get the toothpaste back in the tube, they just agreed to smear new black box warnings all over the antidepressant lineup, which in turn fueled an anti-psych media fest like something out of Revelations, and it looks like this. The Washington Post, the Washington Times, the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, Herald Tribune, USA Today, Associated Press, and all over network news, until as of tonight, well, let me put it like this. At our IAS anniversary celebration, I told you psychs were about to believe in the divine wrath of God, and sure enough, they now know that wrath is swift and certain, because in just the last 8 weeks came 37,824 column inches of anti-psych press to mess them up but good. And that's our 2006 campaign for the global obliteration of psychiatry. Then there was campaign number 2, making human rights a global reality. It's the handling LRH gave as the only means to end government abuses by bringing them under the law. Our campaign is ostensibly driven by our lineup of public service announcements to both inspire popular human rights movements and pressure governments to adopt the Universal Declaration. But this one strikes an especially deep chord because human rights truly are fundamental. Which is to say, we're not really raising popular awareness of said rights, we're reminding them. So in that respect, this one is literally a fourth dynamic auditing process, and you run it as follows. Iran regularly makes the top 10 abuser list, and that's before they enter the contest with a nuclear weapon. So we plugged into a US State Department channel, and our PSAs played to 10 million Iranians for 7 consecutive days. Whether African branches of multinationals are running with our program from the goodness of their hearts or because it's good business is beside the point, but as an estimated 20 million will die in the next 15 years unless a human rights initiative goes into force across Africa, here's how it's done. The Forecourt Media Group books the big screens at 35 Johannesburg gas stations, and here's Shell Oil. Meanwhile, upwards of 140,000 commuters ride the Joburg metro system, and here's what's literally got them out of their seats. There's more again at the big mega music outlets in Rome, and that's 18 screens to a target audience of 150,000. Then there's Milano, 56 screenings a day to an estimated 250,000. Previews of coming attractions are all about whetting appetites with high-impact trailers. Well, here's another way to do it. Buffalo, New York, to a target audience of 910,000. There's more again in the Big Apple, this one on a big projection screens at Union Park. While across the Southern Hemisphere, and with the blessings of the Catholic Church, it's even bigger still. So there was only one way to top it, and here we go. CNN International, All Africa Television, All New Zealand Television, all 3 Italian networks, Great Britain, France, Germany, the whole Commonwealth of Independent States, and half the Asian subcontinent, while right here in Los Angeles, it was IAS Freedom Medal winner Ann Archer with Human Right number 1 to another 12.8 million viewers, bringing the total to more than 2,000 stations across 71 nations, and if you want to know more, try 54 million people, and that's our human rights campaign as of this New Year's Eve, 2007. While the Way to Happiness numbers were already big as of last year, Operation Planetary Calm is all about global saturation, as in worldwide airplay of 21 public service announcements, each one illustrating a precept from the Way to Happiness. It's also about plugging into what you might call the worldwide social mainframe for high-volume delivery to target populations. By way of example, while you can shotgun booklets across any town USA, you need distribution points like this one to hit mainstream America. It's the Ashland Springs Hotel in Ashland, Oregon. It caters to upscale vacationers, and instead of a Gideon's Bible on the nightstand, it's now the way to happiness. Similarly, while you can hand out bundles of booklets across every African-American neighborhood, you need someone like this to reach a target group of 12 to 18-year-olds. She's hip-hop fashion queen Kimora Lee Simmons. Her custom cover coordinates with her fashion line, and she funnels booklets through inner cities in both New Jersey and Los Angeles. Then there's our corporate tie-ins. The multinationals tend to have third-world image problems, so this is what they're doing about it. Coca-Cola Pakistan with a Braille edition for the blind, nationally televised no less. Philips Electronics, likewise all over Pakistan, and Dell Computers all over Africa. Then there's the power of Way to Happiness right in the marketplace, as in the big retail chains who have an obvious vested interest to cut shoplifting. And when you're talking frontline retail, you can't get much bigger than 7-Eleven, so here's a few of their 4,000 plus outlets across Taiwan. The numbers grow even larger when you follow the campaign trail into Taiwanese schools. To date, it's 250,000 by order of Taiwan's Ministry of Education. It's also running through national distribution channels elsewhere around the world. Here's the first Lebanese edition, as just approved by Lebanon's Ministry of Security. And here's how Ecuador's Postal Service said, "Merry Christmas 2006. And if I haven't even touched on the grassroots rollout from Africa and Europe to Australia and the Americas, suffice it to say, with presses running off new booklets every 10 seconds and in greater numbers through the last 8 weeks than the whole previous year, 2006 ends with a Way to Happiness now in the hands of more than 70 million people across 131 nations, and that's Operation Planetary Calm as we enter 2007. If you can imagine the campaigns thus far discussed as high-altitude saturation, this is the one where they finally come face-to-face with LRH Tech-trained personnel, namely volunteer ministers. It's also the campaign that rides on what you might call the mystique of one who's been there and done it, which is regularly underscored by the fact VMs all over hell and creation are forever hearing that phrase, "Your reputation precedes you." So here's a little of what drives the campaign we call Global Revolution, September 11, 2006. If you've heard it said VMs are permanently in the roll book of Ground Zero heroes, here's another way to say it. The New York City Memorial Service and citations to VM vets from the New York State Attorney General, New York City Mayor, and the White House. They likewise loom large in South Africa, where a Cape Town team ran logistics along Table Mountain fire lines, and where emergency services proclaimed them to be the greatest force for aid in firefighting history. They did it again at Port Elizabeth, where torrential rain shut down power grids and deluged 5,000 homes, but where a Continental team out of Joburg was literally front-page news. While even as I speak, they're doing what's left of a Category 5 typhoon in the Philippines, simultaneously treating trauma cases and conducting assist seminars in the villages. Likewise, as I speak, there's Indonesia, where a 6.3 quake shut down the whole Yogyakarta infrastructure, and where VM stayed on to set up tech-trained personnel all over the social services network, more than 1,000 in the 26 Indonesian hospitals, at least as many in the state university, and more again in the Muslim mosques, while they're also adding the World Health Volunteers and Indonesian Special Forces. The point, if God forbid Indonesia takes another disaster, more than 13,000 indigenous VMs will know exactly what to do, and yes, that's not only demonstrating something can be done about it, it's what has now become, as of 2006, the greatest disaster relief force this planet has ever seen. All of which, of course, begs the question, how do you prepare populations everywhere else to meet what life dishes out? The answer lies in our VM goodwill tours and cavalcades, now crisscrossing continents at a rate of 40,000 miles a year. They especially target nations where the infrastructure is already thin, across southern Africa, Southeast Asia, and deep into Central Europe. And while I could trot out any number of impressive figures, including 800 plus new VM units now up and running along high-risk zones, let's take a representative example of what a single unit can accomplish, even in a place where the unofficial motto is, no joke, nothing can be done about it. A place like India. The story is classic. A 40-man VM unit out of Calcutta earns their field stripes at the Mumbai terrorist bombing. Civil defense likes what they see and inaugurates what's called a Scientology disaster management seminar. The movement swells and on board steps Miss Calcutta as National VM Ambassador. She in turn tags with Cavalcade Director Muhammad Kali Ullah for seminars to the Central Reserve Police, specifically officers of the 83rd, 95th, and 107th Battalions. Then, to really show something can be done about it, they build an all-Scientology free school in what's known as the Calcutta Dying Streets. As almost no one's worked those streets since Mother Teresa, it's immediately big news. Whereupon, the team moves out in force to hat and mobilize their medical units, first in Calcutta hospitals, then across the greater Indian health community. Finally, and just to cap it, it's an all-India release of the first 4 VM booklets in Hindi at the New Delhi Book Fair, and when I say all-India, I mean 2 national TV spots and 35 reporters from the big circulation papers, at which point it goes utterly off the chart with an all-Scientology volunteer minister series on Sonar Bangla television. Then, even allowing for vast Indian viewerships, this one is big, no less than 3 50-minute shows to more than 100 million people, and that's how volunteer ministers in India are bringing Scientology at a whole new orders of magnitude for 2007. Of course, when you total every number on the 2006 calendar and across every Scientology activity, you arrive at the irreducible bottom line for planetary clearing: ideal central orgs. It's easy enough to figure when you grasp the fact that ideal orgs don't only embody standard tech and policy, they radiate it. Human rights, anti-psych, the whole VM arsenal, not to mention the bridge itself, as well as the emanation of even more new groups and missions, everything channels through an ideal org. That's why ideal org end products add up to a new civilization, and why it's the capper on our 2006 overview. And just by way of openers, we've already taken 13 of those orgs to a done. As for post-opening growth rates, well, just take a look. They soon became St. Hill-sized. Joburg, Tampa, New York, San Francisco, Madrid, the list goes on. But lest you think the creation of this new breed of org is the final target, the brass ring, so to speak, it's actually the preliminary step for unleashing something else. You see, those new orgs are blueprinted to carry public services you've only seen in your dreams. And in that regard, completion of all of them, every org, is really the make-break point for us to unleash everything we hold in our arsenal. And with that in mind, make no mistake, this isn't just our most important strategy. Rather, it's the one which motivates all else, for without it, nothing else will matter. So with all that in mind, let's take a look at what's on the conveyor belt. Because if 2006 will go down in history in terms of aligned forces, here's what Scientologists are teaming up to accomplish world over. Dallas has already lassoed their new premises, literally, and they're likewise corralling support for renovations. The San Fernando Valley is similarly on a serious ideal org track, with upwards of 200 assembling on an ideal org night. Sacramento is, of course, California's state capital, so to ready the territory for a new ideal org, they're not only raising wherewithal, they're also linking with every key government office. You saw Orange County in our opening video. Well, here's what's happening behind the scenes. Bridge flow events, stress test drilling, manning their public divisions org board, all in testimony to the fact an ideal org isn't just a building. You also saw Pasadena on those screens, and their behind-the-scenes story is as simple as it gets. They now have more than 2 million reasons to call themselves new civilization builders. Quebec is yet another you glimpsed in about 2.5 seconds, while their own behind-the-scenes tale would fill an event unto itself. But the short take is as follows. Between activation rallies and expos on the Esplanade, they prepared their field with introductory delivery to 2,300 new people. Then head south of the equator, because likewise seeding the field for future Ideal Org delivery is Melbourne, and they're literally doing it by the truckload. Still another blip on the screen was Venezuela, and their building rallies are commensurately large. While at ITD in Mexico City, it's regularly more than 500 for an Ideal Org bricklaying rally. Europe already boasts 2 Ideal Orgs, Madrid and Milano, but Europe is also home to 800 million ethnically diverse peoples, so here's a little of what's on their Ideal Org assembly line tonight. Verona, with weekly activation events to jumpstart new field activities. Amsterdam, with slideshows of potential building sites to hundreds of key players. Stuttgart, with the full 500 now on their Ideal Org rollbooks. Copenhagen, with the whole Ideal Org extravaganza, including laser lights, fog, and flags. Then there's Budapest, where they're symbolically building it brick by brick, but those bricks represent a real org in the making. Zurich, where it's field-wide bridge flow events to staff their future Ideal Org with OTs, and St. Petersburg, where they've marshaled resources from all over the Commonwealth of Independent States to roll Russia's first Ideal Org out of the hangar. And when you check the screens on the whole Ideal Org air traffic tower, monitoring ground crews comprising 150,000 players in 20 key nations, and when you add to it all else we've previously shown in the acquisition of new buildings, that phrase, new civilization, is not just 2 words, it's 57 Ideal Orgs now on the runway for 2007. But if all that represents what Scientologists are doing in their zone in the creation of their future, let's add in one more that is both the product of every Scientologist and our newest done in the here and now. Namely, 146 Queen Victoria Street and the IAS-sponsored Church of Scientology of London. If you attended or saw our anniversary celebration in October, you saw a preview of it. But as the formal unveiling was a moment unto itself, let's take a look. 1 o'clock on the kind of day that explains why London gentlemen always carry umbrellas. But in deference to the run-of-the-mill black, ours were the colors of the St. George's Cross, England's flag. Also in honor of England, we brought on London's pipes and drums, fresh from Buckingham Palace, no less. Our guests at the podium were likewise British to the core. But the connection runs much deeper. In point of fact, London's city alderman has been on board since our VMs worked the bombings 18 months ago. The connection is just as firm with the Area Division Police, and the same again for no less than the United Nations British Representative for Peace. Additionally, joining the throngs to take the tour were 2 baronesses, a baronet of the realm, a barrister of the court, 2 foreign ambassadors, a dozen mayors from neighboring towns, and half a dozen more lords and ladies. Then there was the Fleet Street crowd, the London Times, the Sunday Times, the Telegraph, the Guardian, Sky News, BBC, and Radio 4, all of which is to say, here's what 10.4 million British subjects saw, heard, or read about October 22nd when we opened her doors.
Distinguished guests, fellow aldermen, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege for me, as the alderman for the Castle Baynard ward, and on behalf of the City of London Corporation, to welcome all of you today to the City of London and to participate in the opening of the new London headquarters of the Church of Scientology. The representatives of the Church with whom I've had the pleasure of working over the past several months have been at pains to stress their desire to be a good neighbour here in the city, to play an active role in the life of the community, and to work with the police and other agencies for the common good. No field of your work is more important, I believe, than your Say No to Drugs, Say Yes to Life campaign. As a magistrate, I see only too clearly and frequently wasted lives of the addicts, prematurely aged, vulnerable to disease, heading for early death. The work which you do in this area is greatly to be welcomed, and I wish you growing success. This wonderful, if rain-soaked gathering marks the start of another chapter in the city's history, and I have great pleasure in being part of the declaration that 146 Queen Victoria Street is open for service. Thank you.
We're a tight-knit community in the city where one comes to know one's neighbours well, sometimes too well, but certainly not in this case. For while Scientology has only lately come to this square mile of London, just last year we've come to know that you bring positive good to the areas in which you work. You're tenaciously bent on bettering this world. As the Divisional Commander at Snow Hill Police Station, I know we live in dangerous times, and that danger has already encroached on our city. The events of the 7th of July brought home to us all that serious violence is not only possible, but it can happen unexpectedly. One of the things that helped make the ordeal of all of us involved in that was the help provided by members of the city community. And frankly, amongst those who stood out were the Scientologists and their volunteer force. Some 300 of you went to the scenes of the 4 different bomb incidents and helped look after the needs of the rescue workers. You ensured they had the material support they needed at that difficult time, providing food, drink, and for those in need, an ear to listen. Also, on a day-by-day, ongoing daily basis, I know of the work on rehabilitation of offenders that members of the church do, the help they provide to drug users. It's a very valuable contribution to society. We're delighted you're here. We look forward to working with you. We, at the City of London Police, wish you all the success possible in your new home in the City of London. Thank you.
I believe, and I believe wholeheartedly, this is a time like no other time. For I have seen the Scientology religion has something of immense value to offer, not only to this community in London, but to the entire world at large. Indeed, through Scientology, I have seen there is a path to the soul, restoring the spirit to life and inner strength, which brings betterment to all. Scientology can and does demonstrate to all that it has effective solutions to what troubles this world today. I sincerely thank Scientology for bringing their new church to this location. It means, and surely it means, that they are accomplishing their objectives, and that can only mean good for this community in London and society as a whole. I consider that it is our Creator's will. I thank you for granting me this honor of speaking today. and wish you all success for a very bright future.
There are a lot of vehicles for improving yourself, which if you're going to be a Scientologist will help you, but actually if you're not a Scientologist, I think will also help you.
Immediately useful in this vicinity because in the City of London we're in an office district, a business area. Some of the courses, such as the communications courses, which will be directly useful to people in their working lives.
With another friend of mine, we plan, after today, seeing the facilities that are here, we plan to come and start with the videos and with the initial course of learning to learn. And that's marvelous.
I want more and I want to learn myself. And I'm hoping that from the work of Ron Hubbard, somebody will able to teach me what should be done, and that's why I'm here today.
I can use a lot of the tools that L. Ron Hubbard has given me through education, through learning to study, and through drug awareness, and through human rights programs, and these amazing resources that are available.
The church will give to everybody a chance in life, those who want to get on and also those who've fallen down in society, a chance to make something of themselves.
There are holes to be filled which the sort of governments and councils don't fill, and so we need this charitable sort of arm of humanitarian that Scientology offer.
And to me, that can only be for the good of the community and the good of the people locally and in the wider world, of course.
Politicians can't resolve all the problems, and the buzzword these days is partnerships, and partnerships should extend everywhere where somebody is willing to put in a positive approach to any problem. So I would support it, really would.
I'm going to engage the City of London and London in general with the Church of Scientology, because I think that people could learn a lot from it.
And your presence here, your establishment of your centre, is timely and opportune. And I hope that your zeal will match the excellent facilities which you provide, because sure it will change life in this capital once and for all.
So that's our newest ideal org at the center of the English-speaking world, and but a glimpse of what the future holds in store elsewhere, and which you'll hear about sooner than you can imagine. But for now, it's time to take our yearly tour of activities across every sector, all over the planet, and from which we apply the tech to the creation of a new tomorrow. And given what troubles London spells trouble everywhere else, you in fact just heard the introduction to our first speaker, the concerns about drug abuse and criminal violence, which in turn go hand in hand with illiteracy. That's what the Association for Better Living and Education is designed to handle. And to tell you about it, please welcome the president of ABLE International, Ms. Rena Weinberg.
As of tonight, ABLE stands in 140 nations for the betterment of more than 6 million people. That we frequently operate beyond the boundaries of Scientology follows from the fact we primarily address populations according to greatest need, according to levels of human suffering. In other words, there's really no other agenda than salvaging lives, and in that regard, ABLE not only embodies our greater humanitarian objective as Scientologists, it's the delivery system. And nothing better exemplifies the statement than the story of Criminon 2006. Beyond a few die-hard prison chaplains and the psychs who simply dole out drugs, no one touches hardcore felons in the maximum security pens. But we know they'll eventually return to society one way or another, either this lifetime or the next. And while we can't expect some death row warden to immediately believe effective rehabilitation is possible, we can certainly show them this: the now famed Leeuwkop Supermax Penitentiary in South Africa. It was a classic Criminon success story 4 years ago when 11,000 incidents of violence per year fell to virtually nothing. While today, it's mass graduations drawing the likes of South African judicial ministers, CEOs of the big labor force corporations, Leeuwkop area councilmen, and even their wives. Then again, we can show them Salt Lake City, Utah, where juvenile probation officers began running with the program, and a 2-year outcome study just pegged us as the catalyst behind an 89% crime drop. And just to show our program crosses all boundaries, there's even Israel, where Criminon's now up and running in every penal institution nationwide, and where the record is unbroken. Not a single case of recidivism amongst exiting Criminon grads. And that's the short story of Criminon 2006. With new programs in Russia, Germany, Great Britain, Thailand, the Czech Republic, and all over the Americas, 34 nations, 2,000 prisons, and universally hailed as the single most effective criminal reform program on earth. But to appreciate the whole Criminon story 2006, you've got to enter what they call the belly of the beast, a full lockdown facility where, owing to behavioral problems, inmates spend 23 hours of every day in their cells. But then in comes Criminon with COM courses, learning how to learn, PTSD, and the way to happiness, at which point what they call a positive attitude factor is suddenly off the chart. And that's what opens cell block doors to the likes of this: full Criminon sponsorship of the Oklahoma All-Prison Rodeo, and new Criminon courses in 2 Oklahoma high-security penitentiaries. Also newly implemented is our Washington, D.C. program. The D.C. jail is a temporary holding house for those either still pending trial or serving shorter-term sentences. And while warden wisdom says that cons will do anything for an early release, so demonstrable was the change in one of our first grads, the parole board cut 2.5 years off his sentence. Then there's the Criminon impact on so-called jailhouse wisdom. Talk to any seasoned con, and he'll tell you that rehab will mess with your machismo. But down in Orange County, conventional jailhouse wisdom reads as follows, and this being a sanitized translation: Criminon is the stuff. Accordingly, and this entirely from word of mouth along the cell block grapevine, what began with less than 24 inmates is now a jail-wide movement some 300 strong. But for the textbook story of Criminon 2006, it concerns another piece of jailhouse wisdom that runs as follows. If you want to see the worst in man's inhumanity to man as perpetrated by a penal system, then spend a little time in a women's prison. By way of example, the so-called treatment center for female prisoners in Panama City. While the warden will tell you about the beauty salon and pedicurist, don't be deceived. There's upwards of 140 inmates in about 7 cells, most with no bedding and the crudest waste disposal system imaginable. Meanwhile, illicit drug use runs about 70%, and another 10% are hooked to the gills on psych drugs. The warden will also tell you about the rehab program, wherein the girls learn arts and crafts in a leather shop. In fact, it's slave labor, and the guards grab the profits. While as for what else goes down in that so-called female treatment center, use your imagination. But then enter wife of Panamanian President Martin Torrijos, and thus First Lady Vivian Fernandez de Torrijos. She's what they call progressive, meaning she's not about photo ops on her husband's arm. She's about this. Hearing of Criminon through Latin America's First Lady grapevine, she conducts an on-site inspection of our Able and Way to Happiness headquarters here in Los Angeles. On returning to Panama City, she immediately orchestrates a first pilot among 35 women from the Central Women's Bloc. Most were in for drug-related crimes and still using. Hence the first point of progress when all 35 students go cold turkey and quit. They were also cleaning up their act as regards Way to Happiness precept number 12, safeguard and improve your environment. They called it Prison Park. They laid the lawn and cut the walkways in 10 days flat, at which point before and after shots made national news, as did the park inauguration, replete with a perfectly harmonized Criminon choir and both Minister of Justice and Director of Prisons in attendance. While even more to the point, Mrs. de Torrijos now had the lion's share of Panama's budget for the National Prevention of Drug-Related Crime, which in turn comprises our largest grant on record for a fully national Criminon rollout in all 73 Panamanian prisons. And that's just the start, because here's our invitation for a Criminon presentation to all 34 members of the Organization of American States. While to top it all, here's the site of our future Central American headquarters as proposed by the Office of the First Lady herself and directly adjacent to the offices of the International Red Cross and United Nations. And yes, that's the Worldwide Criminon Story 2006, their greatest year in history. While some 70% of all crime is drug-related, drug abuse is a beast of another color entirely. Because while crime may temporarily terrorize populations, drugs will permanently hypnotize them. Hence the urgency fueling Narconon expansion through 2006. Hence, too, the first International Narconon Directors Conference. It was convened in Phoenix, Arizona, original Narconon birthplace 40 years ago, and delegates hailed from some 60 cities world over. Also reflective of our now fully global Narconon family were the proclamations, citations, and certificates of appreciation from Oklahoma, Alabama, California, Texas, Michigan, Florida, Mexico, Sweden, Italy, the Ukraine, dozens of them, and all in celebration of Narconon's 40th anniversary. But far more to the point of our first International Narconon Summit was coordinating international delivery. And here's the global view of it. Sweden boasts among the lowest usage rates in Europe, but cannabis consumption among military-age kids still runs better than 17%. So in came the famed Narconon Gothenburg drug ed team for LRH tech-based lectures right into the military. At the Special Forces base in Arvidsjaur, the infantry base on Gotland Island, the tank divisions of Revinghed, and the naval base in Karlskrona, to name but a few. Whereupon that estimated 17% drug use dropped precisely 18%, and our Gothenburg team was promptly booked to present the same across the entirety of Sweden's intelligence and security community. Then again, for the fully classic story of Narconon drug ed impact in 2006, let's hop across the Atlantic and Pacific to Hawaii. Hawaiian kids have been wiping out on crystal meth since the late 90s. In point of fact, Oahu suffers the highest per capita usage in America. But it just so happens Narconon spokesperson Kelly Preston hails from Hawaii, and she knows the demographics. Honolulu further has its own Narconon team of drug prevention strategists, and they've just put together a new drug ed kit geared to parents. It's matter-of-factly called Keeping Your Kids Drug-Free, and just as matter-of-factly presents former users who rode the crystal meth wave right onto the rocks. While to flank it, they've also got a 60-second public service announcement expressly designed for big network play. The point? While the state of Hawaii threw more than $14 million at the problem, better than half of all underage offenders still tested positive to meth. So Nakanon was about to show Hawaii how it's really done. They appropriately kicked it off at Waikiki with their PSA on the big screen and backup airings on NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox, at which point 3 drug ed teams fanned out across the islands, simultaneously hitting both at-risk middle schoolers and the elementaries, more than 17,000 on their first sweep alone, which in turn promptly made for headlines with quotes like this, and it's from the Federal Center for Disease Control. Fact: teen consumption of crystal meth plunged 50%, and it's now significantly below national averages. And yes, that's how you stop a drug epidemic with Nakanon Drug Education 2006. But of course, what most astonishes the likes of a U.S. Center for Disease Control or federal drug enforcement statisticians is the unparalleled Nakanon rehab record, upwards of 80 times better than anything else on the block. And it's better still when you factor in the sheer range of cases Nakanon cracks, from routine heroin to designer drugs that all but hardwire into the central nervous system. So if only in terms of numbers, this many terminal addicts per region, that many failures at the 30-day programs, we come to this. Midwest methamphetamine labs have spiked addiction rates all over Michigan, Detroit, Ann Arbor, even into rural communities. To even dent it, our Stonehawk delivery centers have been operating at capacity and then some. But when you really crunch the numbers, as in square footage equals delivery equals life saved, there's only one acceptable answer to the problem: expansion. So while 3 years ago it was Nakanon Stonehawk, and just last June it was Stonehawk East, as of tonight it's our new Nakanon Stonehawk West. It stands on 15 acres above Lake Michigan at 48,000 square feet, which when coupled with our existing 140,000 square feet, well, you can do the math. Because as of 2006, we're already saving 1,000 lives a year at our Stonehawk delivery centers. But given that's just one link in the greater chain, let's look to another corner of the Nakanon world. Because while both usage profiles and landscape are yet again radically different, the equation is the same in Egypt. Except that heavy drug and alcohol abuse is especially prevalent among the new Egyptian elite. They describe themselves as lifestyle conscious, which all too often means not just high-end fashion, but getting high. Hence, our new Nakanon Egypt, east of Cairo. It's a converted Red Sea resort bequeathed by a developer who figured he'd make good with Allah if he donated to Nakanon. It's also been blessed by the new elite Bible, a full-color, double-page spread wherein trend-setting Egyptians are discreetly advised that the best of the Western drug rehab has finally reached the Arab world, and yes, that's Nakanon Egypt and another major foothold in 2006. But we're not only setting trends for drug rehab far afield, we're also breaking new ground everywhere else. The most timely example, while Louisiana's lifestyle was utterly transformed with Katrina, usage levels by no means dropped when waters receded. So here's our new Narconon Baton Rouge. It's a 3-facility compound that opened just last month with a state drug czar at the podium. And the mere fact of it has already wiped out the local meth lab. Then out across the Atlantic again, there's our new Narconon Macedonia, and it's likewise made the lifestyle mags. Although that's the least of it, because the entire rehab complex was a gift from the Macedonian government. And that's just a glimpse of what lies ahead. Because also looming on the near horizon is Narconon Costa Rica, and Narconon Mexico, Narconon Lombardia, Narconon Kiev, Narconon Canyon Oaks, and Palm Desert in California. And that's just a short list of new rehab and first step centers rising to tackle drugs across 4 continents. And as for the urgency driving Narconon into 2007, it's a combined 5-fold expansion in delivery capacity through the past 12 months alone. However disabling is pandemic drug abuse, this last one is at least as deadly. Because what else is a civilization if not the sum total of wisdom acquired and conveyed by the written word? So while you can talk about a cultural tailspin and people so picture fixated they can no longer even think conceptually, much less grasp word 1 from LRH, that's not drugs, that's illiteracy. And here's what we're doing about it. Assembling at our international training campus at Spanish Lake were more than 200 headmasters, directors, and educators from the Applied Scholastics network of schools, learning centers, and affiliated institutions. Included among them the Director of Curriculum Research for the Gambia, the Permanent Secretary of Education from Zimbabwe, and the National Chancellor of UNESCO Educators, all in all representing a student body of about 5 million. Also represented were at least 1 million more from inner-city public schools, developing world parochial schools, and the Ivy League preps, which is another feature of our Educators Conference, affiliates networking to bring LRH study technology across the rest of academia. By way of example, the newly formed Effective Education Center of West Sussex. It's but a stone's throw from St. Hill Manor, and former East Grinstead Mayor Alan Lord cut the ribbon. But among the first through the doors were English as second language students from as far afield as mainland China and Saudi Arabia. Our second language learning program is also up and running across the Baltic states, most famously in Latvia, where transplanted Russians use a translated LRH learning book to read and write Latvian. And it's all funded by the National Language Integration Department. But the representative model of study tech for language-challenged students is India, and particularly the mega cities like Hyderabad. It's as close to the Tower of Babel as it gets, with a base language split into 4 distinct dialects and Old Colonial English as a 5th. But English is also the requisite language for students entering Hyderabad's burgeoning data tech and biotech industries. Hence, the Applied Scholastics Study Tech pilot at the Gateway International High School. There was a lot riding on it, including contracts with the likes of Dell Computer and Microsoft, now shopping for an Indian workforce, which is why attendees included state ministers of information technology, infrastructure, geology, and mines. But given even preliminary test results after study tech implementation, it was sealed. In the news, on state television, Central India's Gateway High is now a fully licensed applied scholastic school, and as we ring in a new year, the headmaster is at Spanish Lake to earn his study tech degree. There is, however, another academic marker of applied scholastics progress through 2006, and it returns us to one of our oldest and best-known affiliates, the now fully national Delphi family. The network boasts 9 schools coast to coast, including Boston, where both faculty and students are predominantly African American, San Francisco and San Diego, geared to first-generation kids of Asian software execs and designers, and of course, Delphi Santa Monica and Delphi Los Angeles, now serving as study technology showcase schools for academic delegations from as far away as Korea, Taiwan, and Israel. Then there's the now famed Delphi curriculum, including algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and calculus, advanced computer skills, world history, and what amounts to the canon of Western literature. All of it gradiently check-sheeted out and otherwise incorporating every tool from the LR8 Study Tech arsenal, not to mention ethics, admin, and the data series. And with an eye on what makes for academic excellence, that's why Delphi's flagship in Oregon has now been toured by no less than the Assistant Secretary for the U.S. Department of Education, John Hager, while the U.S. Secretary of Education Representative, Donna Foxley, attended Delphi's 30th anniversary. And just to cap it, with Delphi students now enrolling from more than 24 countries and regularly scoring off-the-charts achievement tests, it's no surprise that the Council for American Private Education now includes Delphi's own vice president. And combine it all, and that's how Applied Scholastics is spreading LR8 Study Tech into every strata of learning, with our schools and groups demonstrating LR8 technology not just in the US, but to education ministries of Canada, Italy, Sweden, Australia, Mexico, the Philippines, Japan, 65 nations in all, and every one of them now on board with Applied Scholastics International. Which brings us to the worldwide ABLE overview for 2006. And once again, it's not only LR8 Study Tech to 1.6 million through the last 12 months, and it's not just 70,000 inmates on the road to self-respect with Criminon, nor is it even the 500,000 more steered clear of drugs through Narconon. Because as of tonight, and across 140 nations, the combined force of ABLE brought frontline LR8 technology to no less than 5 million people world over in 2006. You've just seen across the ABLE playing field, there's yet one more story for 2006, and it returns us to all I said as regards illiteracy as a culture killer and wrecker of civilizations. It also advances us right into 2007, when better than 1 billion people will reside in third world slums with no hope of bettering their lives because they cannot read or write. And if such a scenario seems in any way unreal, well, that's the story you're about to see, which is to say, this is what it's like at the bottom of the illiteracy barrel, and this is what you, as a dedicated Scientologist, can do about it by making LRH's purpose your purpose and working under the banner of the Association for Better Living and Education.
Overcrowded classrooms, underqualified instructors, and insufficient budgets. That's a snapshot of education in the 21st century. Now superimpose Nigeria, and the picture is as grim as it gets. Student-teacher ratios 500 to 1. Half the instructors barely literate themselves. Add to that the exodus of Nigeria's brightest minds, and it all points to a bleak future for this emerging African nation. But revolutionizing the field of education in Nigeria with LR8 study technology is Applied Scholastics and a dedicated team of Scientologists. February 2004, at the invitation of the Nigerian government, a delegation from Applied Scholastics International touched down in the capital city of Abuja. With 400 in attendance, including representatives from the Office of the President and federal and state education ministries, the ABS team introduced the nation to study technology. 24 hours later came the official announcement of the first Nigerian study tech pilot, fully funded by Nigeria's Education Tax Fund. And with that, Applied Scholastics put out the call for a delivery team. The first to respond was Ben Runge, veteran auditor and supervisor from Hanover, Germany, and now lead technical terminal to spearhead the Nigeria Study Tech team.
One of the first things I found in Scientology was study tech. This changed my whole life. In Nigeria, I knew that this would salvage the country. So we set out to bring it to the nation.
The pilot group convened in Lagos for an intensive 5-day workshop. 110 educators from across 10 Nigerian states. The commissioner from the host state welcomed the assembly, including teachers and professors from public, Christian, and Muslim schools. At which point, it was the Study Tech for Educators course, with Ben and his 4-man delivery team. 2 of them Nigerian educators he specially trained for the job. A crash course, but thorough, as evidenced by uniformly rehabilitated graduating teachers who had discovered for themselves the missing link to learning. And when they fired back to their schools, Ben and his team led the way as on-site advisors to help implement study tech. First, it was Greenwood House School, where teacher Motunrayo Fawaimi introduced word clearing and saw her students' pass rates climb by 30% in a matter of weeks. Then it was Mosun Mola Akinsola at the Lagos Girls Junior Academy. 300 learning how to learn, and so ending the truancy problem. Christ Redeemer College, Isaac Abimbola training all 50 teachers and 400 students, and grades shooting up from C's to A's. And when pilot delivery wrapped, results said it all. Those initial 110 teachers had trained another 370 educators, who, in turn, improved the exam scores of a full 110,000 Nigerian students. And with that, the Education Tax Fund called a national press conference to unveil their next initiative, another round of teacher training and a rollout of study tech across all Nigeria. This time, the students were handpicked by the Education Fund, 85 of Nigeria's top educators from 20 institutions of higher learning. They were to become a corps of master teachers who would then take the tech to the instructors in training at their universities. Ben headed up an Applied Scholastics team of 15 certified instructors and word clearers. The schedule was tough, 6 days a week for 6 weeks, 10 hours a day. But these were Nigeria's most dedicated. The rigorous training lineup covered every aspect of study tech. And when these PhDs and Masters of Education received their Applied Scholastic certificate, it signified a new era for Nigeria. For there stood a force of educators like never before. Masters of Study Technology. At which point, application was at the very foundation of Nigeria's educational establishment. In the University of Ibadan, Nigeria's first institution of higher learning, where Dr. Ugunle Olodare imparted study tech to 25 fellow PhDs and 200 teachers in training. With that, the number passing flew from 55% to 100%. While at Nigeria's largest teachers' college, Adiniran Ogunsahaya College of Education, it was 2 professors first training 70 faculty members. Then moving on to the student body, and bringing a whole new meaning to those words, mass education, with 1,000 at a time through communication drills, from being there to bull bait, preparing them for anything they might face in the classroom. And after study tech, not one tardy student, not one absent school day. And test scores leapt by more than 60 points. And so it swept across the whole of this West African nation. At the Lagos State University Staff School, where it was study tech to the professor's own kids, and an all-school celebration of Applied Scholastics Dictionary Week. At Okine College, where more than 3,000 future educators were now breaking through barriers to study. At Adamu Agoué College of Education, where teachers in training flew through courses in half the time. And on to Idris Premier College, where failing students leapt to the head of the class. While at the Federal College of Yola, it was a study tech check sheet on atomic and quantum physics, doubling passing rates. And that's how study tech entered the curricula in schools from the Niger Delta to the banks of Lake Chad, until Adiniran Ogunsahaya College of Education just opened Nigeria's first National Applied Scholastics Delivery Center, right on campus, fully funded and staffed by the university. So it's become a truly national movement, for with 600 more master teachers from 12 universities across 6 regions currently in training, Applied Scholastics is bringing study technology to no less than 500,000 students across Nigeria.
I particularly liked Applied Scholastics because it encouraged the child to move at his own pace and to expand his mind and learn more.
What it will all amount into is a sane society. So we are already preparing the ground with study technology for a sane and calmer society.
We so like it, and by the grace of God, we will be supporting it. We'll be supporting it.
Its result, its effect is unquantifiable, and it's, in terms of effect, even on the nation, it's unimaginable, because it throws up a new frontier of opportunities.
We will look at the future of Nigeria to be brighter than every other, even to be the master of all African countries in learning and in education. Because the way we are putting it now, Nigeria has secured a perfect learning standard.
There is nothing more powerful than the tech. And when you see it really changing people's lives across an entire nation, you know, okay, it's time to get busy everywhere and really clear this planet.
And that's how dedicated Scientologists revolutionized a country's education system with LRH Tech, and in so doing, halted the decline of an entire nation.